lion. The experience of losing yourself is the experience of being so intensely involved in something that you can't have these further elaborative thoughts. It's not self coming and going, it's the amount of thinking that comes and goes. It's just a bad expression. So what I want to turn to for the final part is some reductive theories. All of the theories I've been talking about try and identify something that is the self over and above the content of experience. But maybe the self is to be found in experience. William James says that the self is a kind of sense of our feelings or emotions. When you're experiencing an apple, you also have some emotions associated with that apple, or some bodily states and feelings of sensations going on in your body, and he thinks these things are the neural basis, the psychological basis of the phenomenal self. The view has recently been resuscitated by Antonio Damasio, who says the self is involved in experiencing your body, especially bodily-based emotions, in response to objects you experience in the world. So I'll make James smile. Now, the problem with saying the self is an experience of your bodily emotions is that it seems to be there are lots of tasks where we have just as much claim to saying you're aware of yourself without any strong experience of emotion. So if I ask you to count backwards, there may not be much by way of emotional involvement. It's not clear why the task of counting backwards is less self-involving than any other task. But more importantly, I think the presence of emotions may just not be sufficient for saying there's a phenomenal self. So for example, there's a lot of work on emotional contagion. Amy Copeland has done a lot of work on this topic. And the idea is when I see Amy Copeland showing terror face, I experience terror, I catch her emotion. And I probably catch her emotion, the science suggests, and Ralph Adolphs has been a major figure in this, I probably catch her emotion by experiencing a bodily state akin to her experience as she displays terror. She displays terror, I imitate her terror automatically, and then I experience my body changing in these ways. Now notice when I do this, I'm not experiencing myself being afraid. Arguably, I'm not experiencing anything I like at all. I'm totally focused on Amy. I'm attributing to her fear. So my experience is focused at the other, not at the self, even though it's an experience of my body. But also, I think there's no strong correlation with the presence of emotions and a presence of selfiness. So for example, you can have very intense emotions. Suppose you hear a loud, sudden sound while you're sleeping at night. A window crashes. That's an experience of terror that follows. But you're not at all thinking about yourself. You're focused entirely on the prowler who's just entered your apartment. So this idea that when you have intense emotions, you have to become more aware of yourself seems to be empirically false. And indeed, there are some emotions that seem to be self-involving and others that don't. But here we have shame and here we have guilt. Shame is said to be a very self-involving emotion, where guilt is a very action-involving emotion. Both can be equally intense, even though they differ in the degree to which they seem to involve a sense of self. So I don't think the presence of emotions is what correlates with an experience of the self. If anything does, it's not whether or not you have an emotion, it's something above and beyond this. What is it? Two more things to consider. Maybe it's ownership. So what does ownership mean? In contemporary cognitive neuroscience, the idea of ownership has to do with ownership of your body. So experiments with things like this have tried to get at the neural basis of ownership. People study out-of-body experiences. Now, out-of-body experiences may sound exotic. How many of you have had an out-of-body experience? So they're not, some people have. And don't think that those people are freaky fruitcakes or anything like that. It's actually fairly common, and you can induce it in the lab, and the people who have these experiences don't necessarily have any supernatural beliefs associated with them. It's fairly common, they have a common phenomenology. And it turns out if you look at what's going on in the brain when you induce an out-of-body experience, the area that tends to come up is the right temporal parietal juncture, which is listed in red here. So people like Thomas Metzinger have argued maybe that's the neural basis of the self, because what's going on is you're experiencing another body and you're taking